And let's go on to our next topic, which is something that was such a fun way to watch a movie, and that's Jerry Seinfeld's Unfrosted, which just debuted on Netflix. I had heard that this movie was getting kind of like divided reviews, and I imagine you could say that pretty much for every film that ever gets released, right? There's going to be some people that love it. There's going to be some people that hate it, whatever. And this one's slicing the critics basically across the board. And I'm here to tell you that this is, if you're looking for camp, if you're looking for comedy that is just plain fun, it's not going to have a lot of substance, and you want to break from, let's face it, TV's onslaught of like heavily dramatic plot. I mean, this is it. It's a who's who of comedy. I know that's a cliche, but it's pretty much all of Jerry Seinfeld's comrades and friends and together making a movie, right? You have Jim Gaffigan, you have Max Greenfield, you have Amy Schumer, you have Bill Burr. I mean, in this film, there's so many people that if you know comedy, Melissa McCarthy, if you know comedy, you just know that this is going to be fun. James Marsden. I mean, like, who else? I mean, there's all this stuff. The plot of the movie is basically this space war, space race, rather, a fake space race between Kellogg's and company and the Post company in 1963, right? And it goes through them trying to invent what eventually becomes the Pop-Tart, and it is a parody of several different movies. I mean, there are Godfather sequences in this. There's a little bit of Beatlemania at the end. There is some Oppenheimer that it looks like they straight ripped a scene from Oppenheimer last year and put it in here. These characters are surprisingly like shallow and deep at the same time. I can't even explain it. It's just like you get invested so quickly, and I think the pace of it is perfect. It is so fast. It's like a joke every 6 minutes, or really not every 6 minutes, or every 6 seconds rather. It is one of the. It's almost built like a stand-up special. I mean, it's just like goes, and it's just, it doesn't let you breathe for a second before the next ridiculous moment happens, which is what makes this so appealing to watch, right? I feel like the movies in general have not had that many opportunities for great comedies to come about, right? And I don't think the movies is necessarily a place where, especially, I'm talking about the theater at this point. This obviously came out in streaming services on Netflix. But there's not many opportunities to sit there and go, you know what I want to do? I want to go to the theater and watch a comedy, right? If this thing came out in theaters, I think this would be a very, very successful theatrical release, because it would bring people back that I don't think you go to the movies anymore for comedy, right? I think you're constantly presented with like the same type of Seth Rogen-esque raunchy comedy that you're not sure whether you're going to walk out feeling good and feeling, happy. You don't have to worry about any of this in this. It's not like shocking comedy. It is just straight like funny. Straight like these are just jokes. Like, we know some of them are going to be a little bit over the top. We know they're going to be campy, and they just really play into it, and they make it ridiculous, and they keep on one-upping themselves the entire plot. So by the end, when Jerry, when his character is in a fight with the milkmen of the 1960s, and they're also talking about, with Kennedy, about releasing sugar because the Russians are getting involved, you realize that you've just grown to such a level of ridiculousness that it just plays so well. It just plays so well. It's a nice, funny comedy. It just keeps on one-upping itself. It reminds me of just being in improv, when you would be in a scene and you need to take it to a new level, right? There's a form in improv called Herald, which is taught pretty much it used to be taught by the UCB. It was taught by the Improv Olympic when that was still in existence, and that was the style that Seinfeld was based after, right? Or what they claimed Seinfeld was based after was this form called the Herald, where you start off with establishing scenes, and then there's a little bit of a game in the middle, kind of an abstract game, and then the scenes start to intertwine in the second sequence, and then everyone is together in one big group scene because you've established all these characters. It kind of works like that. Like you're establishing these characters, and eventually everyone's kind of coming to this big moment at the end, and you're one-upping, right? And you're trying to make it more ridiculous, or you're trying to get the extra tag. It kind of has that flow to it. And so this is really deeply analyzing something that probably shouldn't be deeply analyzed, but it's a great movie. It's honestly, it was the quickest 2 hours of watching a movie on Netflix that I've ever had. Like, it was just an enjoyment to watch. Jim Gaffigan does a really good job being essentially Jim Gaffigan's ridiculous character. Hugh Grant, who plays this jaded mascot who essentially leads I'm assuming that it's a play off of what happened on January 6th, like this kind of raid on the building kind of thing. And it plays it perfectly, right? Plays a jaded, who is that mascot called? Tony the Tiger, who basically leads a raid against Kellogg. It's a funny, clever, absolutely ridiculous concept. There are moments that are just throwaways, like during Tony the Tiger's raid, there's a ketchup and a fry that go through an emotional moment. It all happens in 6 seconds, and then they're out. It never comes back again. There's a ridiculous elements of these characters that we've seen for ages on the Quaker Oats box, like you just saw, come to life and just have these ridiculous characters, but they're playing it all so straight that it's like that you really buy into the reality of this world, and it's goofy as hell. And I feel like anybody else executing this, it probably wouldn't work as well, but something about the fact that everyone is so bought in, and it's not like the greatest acted thing in the world, but it's just so well put together and well crafted that it just makes it an enjoyable watch. So whatever the reviews say, I give this thing a positive review. This is one of the better comedies I've seen lately. I love how campy it is. It just reminds me of it reminds me of Conan a little bit, like Conan O'Brien. I was discussing to somebody the other day that watching Conan O'Brien and seeing Conan come back, right, that you miss this element of goofiness that used to exist on television that you don't see anymore, right? Like Jimmy Fallon's playing games with people. Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert, they have a little bit of a political twinge, right? But Conan always kind of represented the goofiness of late night, and that there was always this element of it didn't matter. It wasn't really pertaining to the world. It didn't need to exist, yet it does exist. And there was something relaxing and enjoyable about watching that type of comedy. This is the same thing. If I told you a couple months ago that one of my favorite movies would be about a space race with Kellogg's cereal and Post cereal, I don't know. I'd probably ask to be hospitalized. I don't know what I'd be talking about. But this is something that needed to exist. I think this is such a beautiful thing to kind of come out now. It's a very, very enjoyable summer movie. I couldn't highly recommend it. I couldn't recommend it enough. So go watch Unfrosted. It's a funny comedy from Jerry Seinfeld. There's a Instagram ad about Kellogg's, talking about they didn't give any rights for him to do this. I'm really intrigued about how he got permission to do this, or whether he got permission at all to do this. There's a little bit of a video online of Kellogg's basically joking that he didn't get any permission to do it. If he didn't, that'd be funny. But usually you would assume that these big companies would be very protective of their brand, and they would want to know. And you'd think that if they're talking about Kellogg's or whatever, they'd want to know exactly what he's going to say, what the movie was. They want to play it safe. there's something about this film that makes me think that no one saw it before it was made, and maybe they just greenlighted it because it was so good, or maybe there's no permission given at all. I'm really intrigued to see how this thing came about because I feel like there are so many opportunities for a big company to be protective of its brand and say no or wreck the script or rewrite the script so it makes them look better. Like even Post, right? I mean, Post Serial, right? Could being, enacted as a villain in this thing, a goofy villain. They must have greenlighted it, right? So maybe they saw the name Jerry Seinfeld and said, well, how can we say no, right? It's going to be good. So this would be almost stupid to not give him creative liberty on this. So I'm intrigued to kind of go behind the scenes of this movie and see how it was made and how they kind of came to the idea. And to see if there was like rewrites and if they came to the table with this idea and how much it changed. Because I feel like comedy goes through those rewrites and everyone brings writers and it gets worse and worse and worse. And an original idea could be great, but by the time it actually hits post-production, it's a shell of what it used to be. So I'm really intrigued to see the behind the scenes of this movie and what it was like. But anyway, Unfrosted on Netflix. Jerry Seinfeld's new movie about Pop-Tarts is out now. Go check it out and tell me what you think. Leave a comment about what you think the movie was like or what your feelings were towards the movie. Because if this was truly divisive, I want to know what those people, the people who are negative about it, want to see from a comedy. Because this is exactly what you want. You want just like fun goofiness on screen. What else could you want, right? It's like kind of like it's not provocative, right? By any stretch of the means. It's just funny. That's what you want from a movie. And if they didn't like it, you know what? Lighten up, Anyways, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk about Aaron Judge's ejection. Yes, you heard me right. It's an ejection, his first in his career. And we'll talk about some funky baseball plays as well as some new City Connect jerseys coming up next on the Powell Not Found podcast. Then we'll wrap up the show because we're getting a little long this week. So, all right,